Okay, so I think everyone's flagging, so we're going to try and do really exciting speed demonstration. Hey, throw lollies at you, yeah. So we're going to talk about the carrying capacity equation that our department uses. We get a lot of requests to work out carrying capacity, which might surprise some people, but we wanted to demystify it a bit. For lots of people, they might be really thinking, no, I know my carrying capacity, and they probably do. But if you're new to an area, it's really good to be able to work it out in your own head. There's some other things there too. There's a lot of indications that we've spoken over the last few days that our climate is changing. So, you know, we might want to be able to make some assessments on what that means for our pasture growth. A lot of discussions too about rehabilitating rangelands. And that always comes at a cost. So it's like, well, how are we going to balance that improvement, or hopefully improvement in land condition, with the expense of improving that land condition? So there's a couple of the reasons why we're going to have a look at it today. Okay, so essentially this is the carrying capacity equation that we use. So the first thing that we're going to have a look at is pasture growth. So for many, many years, like decades of research in Central Australia, there's been people out there measuring, taking photos, estimating, cutting grass. We've got a really pretty good idea of what is actually growing in the landscape. The first model that was developed for estimating grass in the rangelands was actually done with CSIRO in Alice Springs. So it's local stuff. Often stuff isn't for our region, but this is local. So that project then evolved into GRASP. So GRASP is a computer modelling program that they use in Queensland and nationally for working out how much grass growth we get in different seasons. This was calibrated across Northern Australia, and in Central Australia we did a heap of different land types, thousands of quadrats, thousands of cuts, collecting defoliation with tweezers. Do I sound a bit bitter? Soil profiles, so we would work out, you know, how much moisture we've still got in the soil, X amount of time after rain. So a really good handle on it, but really, really smart brains working out the modelling. So this is an example of a model run. So once they've worked out this model, which says, right, I've got this amount of rain, this amount of sunshine, I've got this soil type, I've got this slope on my landscape, how much grass am I going to get? And so these really smart brains do these computer models, and they run these models for 100 years with the rainfall that we know occurred in those areas, and they match it to see what happens. And they know what happens because they recorded pasture growth at different times over all those years. So the blue line is the model run. So this is from 1988 to 2003. So the blue line is the model run. That's what the model said was the amount of grass that grew. And those red dots are the actual cuts of grass taken in that landscape. And this is for just north of Alice Springs, on a land type just north of Alice Springs. So I'm pretty happy with that accuracy. So then once they've run all the model, you know, for 100 years or so, they can rank them. If you remember, we talked about medians earlier today, and if you rank something from the highest to the lowest, then the one in the middle is your median. So we don't do an average because that gets again distorted by those really big seasons. But if we do a median, it's the one that we can expect that we'll get that, you know, 5 years out of 10. So if we look at the median here, is that the light? So the median growth here is 685 kilograms per hectare on limestone country. Oatgrass country, calcareous country, people have different names for it. This might be where you think to yourself, 5 years out of 10, if you base it on that, that's enough feed 5 years out of 10. So the flip side to that is you won't have enough for 5 years out of 10. But you're not going to eat everything, hopefully, in the first year. And one of the beauties of our pasture types is that it carries over and it retains its nutrition for up to 2 years. And we know that again because we have cut hundreds of samples and we have had them analysed for their nutrition. Depending on your risk profile, and I'm particularly risk adverse, so I might be someone who says, actually, I'm setting mine at the 70%. I want to make sure I've got that much grass at least 7 years out of 10, but that's just me. Other people might like to live on the edge and make it a bit higher. However, when we do our carrying capacity calculations, we generally do it on the median, so 50% of the time. So I'm just going to, I have written it there, and then I picked up a permanent texter and wrote it on the board. So if we're going to say we've got 685 kilos, because that was our median for that land type, so we'll put that one up there. The second thing to look at is the safe utilisation. So you might not have heard of this term before. So safe utilisation is how much you can safely consume and maintain your land condition at that rate. Why can't we eat the lot? I think we've heard a lot of that over the last 2 days anyway, but we need it for the nutrient cycle. If we eat the lot, all those nutrients and turn that into beef and it's gone. Yeah, there'll be some in manure, but essentially mostly what we wanted was to turn it into beef. So, that's gone. So we need it for that nutrient cycle so that the microorganisms can keep growing, so that we're feeding the biocrust microorganisms, all the other soil microbes that live in there. They all eat some of that plant material too. It's not all available to feed cattle. We need to leave leaves on there because that's the bit that photosynthesises, which turns sunlight into feed. So we still need to leave some. It also then is the mechanism for the plant to grow better roots. And we want better roots for holding the soil so that the plant can respond next time it rains, so that it can last longer into dry periods. Secondary tillering, particularly on our perennial grasses, you don't want to eat it all the way down really quickly because a lot of them are capable of, in the next rain event, producing growth from what they call the secondary tiller. And you actually get more feed for your growth there because it's growing off a high part of the plant. So you don't want to be taking it down too low. Obviously for seed production, because at some point that individual plant is going to die and we want new ones to come into the landscape. So we need to allow the plants to mature and set seed, and our haystack, so that we've got some that lasts us. Hey, even if next year is good too, we need to actually, still 12 months until we get there. So none of that surprises people, but the amount that you can use might, and it's only 10%. But I do want to point out a couple of things. That's weight, not height. So don't freak out, because when you look out at a paddock, you're like, 10% of height. It would be, minor. It's a weight thing. So it can be quite a bulk, as that picture shows. Central Australian land types are very low at 10%. Or 15%, so 10% for oakgrass or limestone country, which is what we were looking at. Open woodland is a bit higher, often because you have some species that are more tolerant of grazing pressure. Spinifex is lower because there is less palatable material in there, and you don't want to allow for saying, I can eat 20% of Spinifex, because they can't eat 20% of a Spinifex plant. And the buffel might give you an extra 5%. And the reason I say might is because this is all what the modellers are working out. They keep working this out. They are nerds, and it's fabulous that we have nerds because they are determined to get the answer, and they keep looking at examples to work it out. Interestingly though, even in landscapes that we might consider more productive, like Mitchell grass, Barclay tablelands, etc., we're still only talking 20 to 30% in really good areas. So utilisation is not very much. And I think that is where I'm handing over. I'm going to put that on the board and then hand over to Lakota.
Thanks, Ali. So I'm doing the animal intake part of the equation. I just want to point out that all this is interconnected. We can't just focus on one, we've got to focus on all. So land condition will affect your pasture quality and quantity, which will affect your diet quality, which your diet quality will affect on how much your animal can actually intake, and then that in turn will affect your growth and AE calculations. So there's your money. So generally, as Kate pointed out today, that as land condition declines, so does the most palatable species, leaving the unpalatable species dominating. So the dynamite of the pasture, what's going to give you the more bang for your buck? That is the dry matter digestibility. So that's all the part of the dry matter that can be actually used and consumed by the animal. The rest of it turns into manure. So the higher the digestibility, the higher the metabolizable energy, and the higher the dietary crude protein. Generally speaking, Old Man Plains suggests that usually at least 55% of a pasture is digestible. So this is what the calculations are going to be assumed. So the average dry matter digestibility of 55%, the intake for one animal equivalent on an average quality pasture is 8 kilos of dry matter per AE per day. How can this be tested? Does anyone know? So with NIRS testing, that's how they actually calculate that. So that's through the fecal testing. What is an AE? That's right. So an animal equivalent is a 450 kilo Boss Taurus steer, 2 1/4 years old with 0 live weight gain, walking at least 7 kilometres per day on level ground. Now that's maintaining their weight. So why do we need these guys? Does anyone know? They're actually quite important. They're a standard animal for other animals to be compared to. So different animals of different breeds will have a different AE rank. So it's based on how much metabolizable energy they will need based on the comparison to this animal equivalent. So a weaner will obviously have a lower AE compared to this standard animal, which is a 450 kilogram steer. A breeding cow, which is pregnant, has lactated, and will have a calf at foot to weaning. The average AE is 1.79. So the average pasture intake of an animal will change compared to the quality of your pasture. Generally, the higher quality of your pasture, the more that they can eat, and they do not need to consume as much to get the same amount of metabolizable energy. So it is assumed that their intake is actually less at 7.5 kilograms per AE per day for higher productivity regions. So the 8 kilos per AE per day is on moderate regions. So that's your average pasture. And on lower productivity regions, you'll have animals can't eat as much. It's a lower quality pasture, it's lower digestibility, and therefore, however, to get the same amount of metabolizable energy, they'll need to consume more. So the intake is more at about 8.5 kilograms per AE per day for lower productivity regions, like I just said. So we're going to have a hands-on activity now. Can we get 2 volunteers to head outside, and can I get 2 volunteers to grab how much pasture they think 1 AE would eat in a day?
Who's going first?
So we got these 2 young lads getting out how much they think 1 AE would eat per day.
Per day. Just on a moderate day, or
Now this is average pasture. Don't look at it yet.
Yeah.
He's picking out the good bits, this one.
You're a bit picky. So who thinks who's right? Who's right? None of them?
Like weight comparisons.
Well, we're guesstimating, right?
I think it was already.
I mean, you look at your paddock and you estimate how much feed's in there, don't you?
Nah, actually, I reckon. Well, I reckon this one here.
Oh,
Oh, look, that's the higher education that's paid off. They actually need the whole lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yep.
that's how much for 1 AE, so 450 kilo Bos Taurus steer for 1 day.
Alright, so I want you to think about how many breeders do you have? So
Just,
How
you can
many
just keep
breed-
it in your head.
yeah, keep it in your head. So for argument's sake, let's say you have 4,000 breeders at an average weight of 500 kilos each. So it's actually 20,807.2 tonnes of dry matter to feed them each year. And that looks like 48,400 round bales per year to feed your 4,000 breeders. So that's not including your bulls, heifers and steers that you're running with them. So yeah, I just thought that it was really neat to show how much you're expecting off your paddocks. So I thought this would give you a bit of a laugh. We'll talk about getting back to pre-pregnancy weight.
So to finish the equation, so we had 685 kilos per hectare. We can utilise 10% of that, and 1 AE needs 8 kilos a day on average country. So we do those sums, I did them earlier. So, sorry. So this is our calculation. So we've got our pasture growth at 685 as a median. We can utilise 10% of that. They need 8 kilos a day. So that gives us a figure of 8.56. Now we want to turn that into AEs per square kilometre because that's more useful for us. So we times it by 100 to get our area, and we divide it by 365 days of the year, and that gives us 2.3 AEs per square kilometre for limestone country in really good condition. There was a brief mention of discounting for land condition, which we're not really talking about today, but just for interest's sake, in A condition it's 2.3, B condition it's discounted because of pasture availability and pasture nutritional quality to 1.8, C condition 1.1, D condition 0.2, and so you can see then how working out some calculations and stocking rates can help you to start working out where your expenses are in terms of improving land condition. I think that's probably all.
So this is just a summary of basically what we've talked about in one sentence. So stocking as close to your long-term carrying capacity provides the best option for successfully balancing your pasture productivity, good land condition and profitability for most enterprises in the rangelands. Thanks guys.